normal radio tower looks like. You know, there's the uniform with skinny ones with the guy wires that come off, and you've probably all seen those, probably never really noticed them. Then there's the A-frame self-standing kind of radio tower. Then there's these, and these are a rare tower built in the 30s and 40s. Most engineers, I don't think Tony himself had ever even seen or known of these towers, right? When he first saw it. But only a handful were ever built. They were built by a company called Blaunox. And Blaunox, they went out of the tower business in the 50s. But their heyday of building these towers, these unusual diamond-shaped towers, was in the 30s and 40s. Only a handful were ever built, and only 9 survive today in the entire world, and 6 in this country. 3 of which are at this WBT radio, AM radio site in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, my daughter directed me to the towers. We drove out there to first of all see if we really wanted to take on what John suggested we take on. He actually told me he would write an article once I interviewed the radio station and toured these towers. And so we go to the towers, and there's these 3 enormous, near 400-foot towers in a row, diamond shaped. They are indeed pretty and different. And they were right across the street from the DMV. So on these huge structures, on this huge field. I had been to that DMV countless times with my children. Never once had I noticed those towers. Never once had I seen them. 350-foot towers in a row. And so that was lesson number 1 and the first message of the towers to me. As an author, I love symbolism. And this to me was how many other wonders of the universe are right in front of our face, smacking us in the face with their message. And we don't notice them. And we're not aware that they're even there. So anyway, so I'm already a little bit intrigued. These towers are really cool. I went home and did a little bit of research and found out that no one really knows why the diamond-shaped towers were built in the first place. The company that built them had a company fire and lost all of the original engineer motivations, blueprints, plans. So no one knows why the Blaunox diamond-shaped tower was built. There's a lot of speculation on the 2 or 3 people in the whole world that care, like me. But most people think they were just built because they're pretty, and they are indeed prettier than other towers. So I called the radio station and talked to the chief engineer and said I wanted to come look at these towers, tour the towers, take a lot of pictures. Bring my assistant, who I did not identify as 7 years old yet, and we would come and take pictures and tour these towers. Would that be okay? And they said no. The chief engineer was not at all pleased to have this Yahoo mom from Charlotte with no engineering knowledge. The only knowledge about a radio that I had was how to plug one in and turn one on. And it's a working radio station, so that he was not thrilled to let me come. But I talked him into it if he could get one of his retired engineers to come and give us the tour. And he gave me the name of Ted Bryan. Wonderful, wonderful. Used to be a chief engineer and was now retired. Ted eagerly and quickly agreed that he would give us the tour. So I tell my 7-year-old we're going to go see these towers. I give her a notebook with little ladybugs dancing across the top and a little pen, and said take lots of notes. I'm going to take pictures, and but you take lots of notes, and you're my assistant. You can tell me what to ask. She said I won't know what to ask, and I said listen and just pay attention. I'll bet you'll come up with stuff. And I'm so glad I brought her, because she asked all the questions that I didn't dare to ask because I thought I looked too stupid. But coming from a 7-year-old, it was fine. And she was too shy to ask me the questions, so she would write them down and hand me the little piece of paper, and then I would ask Ted the question. And I became increasingly enamored. One of the most interesting stories about the tower, about all these towers, is that in 1989, Hurricane Hugo, which was a massive storm. Were any of you in Hugo? Do you remember that? came ashore at Charleston, South Carolina as a Category 4 hurricane, huge, massive storm, and walloped Charleston, and then churned up north towards Charlotte and through Charlotte, and it was still a Category 1 hurricane when it hit Charlotte. Very unusual. Hurricanes never hit Charlotte, and certainly not at that force. And as it churned, it devastated Charleston, and as it moved up north, it left a swath of destruction and downed every radio station along its path, including in Charlotte, except for one. WBT remained broadcasting the entire duration of the storm and the aftermath of the storm. And what was really, really wonderful about that is because there was no other radio stations that were operating at all during that time, all of the emergency information that was normally transmitted to the public through a radio station wasn't being transmitted except through WBT. But WBT wasn't in Charleston. So ham radio operators would contact WBT with, they're all in the community, and they would talk to WBT about where the problems were, where the emergency services were needed, and then WBT would relay that information to Charleston and the entire surrounding area of where the storm had hit. And so really, WBT's tower remaining standing during the hurricane probably saved a lot of lives. And that was message number 2 and lesson number 2 of the towers to me, which is when there's storms, stand as tall as you can and as long as you can against the storm, because you never know who you might be helping and whose lives you may even be saving. Well, so the hurricane hits Charlotte, and the chief engineer at the time, whose name was Bob White, notices that a signal is fading in and out, and so he needs to get out to the transmitter side where these 3 diamond-shaped towers are standing to see what he can do to regulate the signal from the radio station. And he said he's driving along in a hurricane. It's a Cat 1 hurricane, and the wind was so ferocious it was lifting his truck up onto 2 wheels. He would see entire trees and root balls go in front of him on the road as he's driving. He reaches the transmitter field, drives out to the base of the towers, and looks up, and he sees Tower B, that the microwave dish on the tower is slightly askew, and that was probably why the signal was not being well modulated. Now, in a 3-tower array, or I guess in any array, Tony's the only one that probably can correct me on this, you guys probably don't know, but there's a 1 transmitting tower, and the middle tower was the transmitting tower, and the other 2 towers actually block the signal. So the other 2 towers are not hot, I don't think, correct?
They're the directional.
They're the directional
Towers, and the center one sends a signal.
Well, so anyway, so he sees what he needs to do. He's correct. He's the expert. He sees what he needs to do. He gets back in his truck, drives around Tower A, which is the first tower in the array, and as he's driving, glances in his rearview mirror and sees the top half of Tower A, like in slow motion, coming down. Now it's a 335-foot tower, so huge, tall tower, and thousands of pounds of steel. And he knows he's right in the trajectory of this tower as the hurricane is blowing it over. So he knows he's dead. And he gunned his Bronco, I think he said he owned, and shot forward and missed being crushed by thousands of pounds of steel by 2 seconds. So the tower came down, and he drove on across the field to where the transmitting station is. He had to get in there to see if he still needs to correct the signal from that's going a little crazy. And he said he wrenched the door open against the storm and stepped out of his car, and his knees just buckled because he was just overcome with fright. He had almost been killed by the tower coming down. He said he crawled across the ground, crawled up the steps into the transmitter station, and gets inside. And he had to get, I think I'm correct about this, it's in the book, read the book, it'll tell you the correct terminology, but he had to restore the signal by getting the audio off of the phone. And to do that, he had to put in a special code in this box where the phone is behind the box. He said his fingers were shaking so much that he couldn't key in the code. So he just ripped the box off the wall and said, I'll fix it later. Keys in the code, and the tower continued transmitting all night long, like I said, and helped a lot of people. Meanwhile, my tour guide, Ted Bryan, was told to go out to the FM tower. And again, it's in the hurricane. Ted's driving out to the FM on the other side of Charlotte. And he crossed a hurricane-swollen creek with water up over the bridge, which, as you know, you're never supposed to do. But he did, and as he's driving across the bridge, he swept into the creek, car and all. And somehow he managed to wrench open the door against the rising water and walked a mile, left the car, abandoned it, and walked a mile through the hurricane to go check on the FM tower, which it actually did fine in the hurricane. So, I mean, the dedication of these tower engineers just amazes me. But anyway, so the hurricane passes, the morning dawns, Bob White, the chief engineer, steps out, and he already knows Tower A is down, Tower B is still transmitting, and he steps around the door and sees that Tower C, the last in this famous old tower array, the whole top third of that tower had been wrenched and sheared completely off, apparently by a tornado, and thrown clear across the field. So here's this famous radio station, by the way, with a miraculous range.